The rain had started early that morning in London. It wasn't heavy, just enough to make the air feel cold and the sky look gray. Everything looked still and quiet, like the city was holding a secret. Most people walked quickly past Wellington Barracks with umbrellas and coats, thinking only about staying dry. But that day, something unusual was happening. A tall man in a charcoal overcoat walked quietly through the courtyard. He had no press around him, no flashing cameras, and no loud guards shouting directions. Most didn't even realize who he was at first. It was Barack Obama, the former president of the United States. He wasn't here for politics. He wasn't here to give a speech or attend an event. There were no red carpets or news reporters. He had come on his own. It's just a man walking through the rain, with something on his heart in his coat pocket. His fingers slowly turned over a bronze coin, one of his old presidential challenge coins. During his time in office, he only gave these coins to people who showed courage, honor, or sacrifice. But today, he hadn't planned to give it away. He wasn't even sure why he brought it. He just felt he should carry it. His security detail followed at a distance, quiet and careful. They knew this wasn't an ordinary visit. This was personal. His lead agent, Sarah Mitchell, quietly reported to command that Raven, their code name for Obama, was walking to the guard's memorial. There were no threats, nothing unusual, just a peaceful visit. Nearby, a group of school children stood with their teacher. They were learning about the memorial, a quiet place honoring soldiers who had given their lives. The children were talking, softly until one of them pointed and said, "Miss Jenkins, is that the president?" The teacher paused, looked up, and nodded. "Yes, Jamie, that's President Obama, but he's not here for us. Let's stay quiet and respectful." As Obama walked, his eyes moved across the courtyard until they stopped at one figure, a royal guard standing completely still. The guard was young, tall, and serious. His name was Lance Corporal Dylan Price. He wore the famous red tunic and black bearskin cap of the Welsh Guards. His back was straight, eyes forward, and hands perfectly still. He had been trained to hold this position no matter what. But inside, Dylan was not still. Just 3 hours earlier, he had received a call from his sister in Cardiff. She was cleaning their late father's things. While searching through an old box, she found a letter, one their father had written, never sent. It was addressed to Barack Obama. She had read parts of it over the phone. Dylan stood in silence, barely breathing. The letter spoke about Dylan, about how proud their father, Tom Price, had been of his son. About how, during his painful last months, Tom would listen to Obama's Cairo speech over and over again. Speech, he said, gave him peace. It reminded him that dignity still mattered in the world, even when life was hard. In the last line, Tom had written, "Perhaps one day you'll meet my Dylan. Perhaps you'll see what your words helped create." Dylan never thought that would happen. But now, just hours later, the man his father had written to, the very man who gave that speech, was walking right toward him. Obama stopped, just 3 feet in front of him. The guard did not move. He wasn't allowed to speak. His orders were clear. No reaction, no expression, no words, no matter who stood in front of him. That was the job. But Obama didn't walk away. Instead, he looked at Dylan closely. He smiled softly and said, "Beautiful morning for standing watch." Still no reply. The president paused, and he said, I've met many soldiers, shaken a lot of hands. But I've always wondered about the ones who never speak. The ones who just stand, strong." Dylan's jaw clenched. His breath changed. Didn't speak. He couldn't. But his silence was different now. It was full of meaning. Obama slowly reached into his coat and pulled out the coin. "Give these to people who do something extraordinary," he said, his voice quiet and steady. "But maybe I've been looking in the wrong places." The coin sat in his open hand, an offering. No pressure, no words, just a moment waiting to happen. Dylan didn't move, and then something changed. For a long moment, it felt like time had stopped. Rain slid down Dylan Price's uniform, but he didn't move. not an inch. He had trained for years to stay still, no matter who stood in front of him, even if it was a king, a queen, or a president. But this wasn't just anyone. It was Barack Obama. And what made it harder wasn't the rank or the fame. It was the words the former president had just said. Obama stood there, quiet and steady, with the bronze challenge coin still resting in his hand. His face showed no politics, no pride, just real emotion. Maybe the real courage, he said softly, is in moments like this. When someone stands for something, without ever saying a word. Dylan's throat tightened. His father's words came back to him, the words in that hidden letter, the last thing his dad ever wrote. Perhaps one day you'll meet my Dylan. Perhaps you'll see what your words helped create. His breathing changed just slightly, barely enough to notice, but Obama saw it. He had spent years reading faces, boardrooms, war rooms, and halls of power. He had learned how to feel the silent moments, the unsaid truths. Now he was reading Dylan's silence, and he knew something. It was happening behind those steady eyes. I can tell, Obama continued. You were raised by someone who understood service, who taught you that being strong sometimes means staying quiet. The crowd behind them stayed still. No one dared speak. Even the children watched silently, feeling they were witnessing something rare. Then it happened. Dylan Price moved. Not a big motion, just a small, careful shift. His right hand lifted from behind his back and reached forward. With calm and purpose, he took the coin from Obama's open palm. Their hands touched. In that small touch was more than respect. It was connection. A bridge between two sons, one who gave the speech and one whose father had never stopped listening to it. Obama's lips parted slightly. For a second, he seemed surprised and deeply moved. Dylan's voice, strong and clear but full of quiet emotion, broke the moment. My father died this spring, sir. Obama looked straight into his eyes. I'm sorry, he said softly. What was his name? Tom Price, Dylan replied. Welsh guard, same as me, 20 years before. Obama nodded slowly. What did he do after service? Drove trucks across the Welsh valleys every day. Never missed a shift. There was a pause. Then Dylan added, he said dignity wasn't about money or medals. It was about how you carried yourself even when no one saw. A breath, as if those words had hit him deep. That's what I meant in my speech, he said. But your father said it better. Dylan looked down for a moment, then back up. His voice lowered, but it was steady. He listened to your Cairo speech every night during his last weeks. On an old cassette player, the one with the broken speaker. Obama blinked. That speech? He asked quietly. The one about new beginnings? Yes, sir. Said it gave him peace. Said it reminded him that he still mattered, even when the pain was bad. For the first time since arriving, Obama's posture changed. Shoulders dropped. His face softened. The silence between them now was full of emotion too deep for words. Did he ever say which part meant the most? He asked. Dylan nodded. The part where you said every person has something sacred inside them. He listened to that part over and over. He said it made him feel seen. Obama looked down, his eyes wet. He took a deep breath, trying to hold himself. Together? I never knew, he said softly. You write words, give speeches, and hope they help someone. But you never really know. Dylan stepped a little closer. His voice was calm, but full of meaning. Your words helped him, sir. Every single day. The former president turned toward the memorial, but his eyes weren't on the stone. They were remembering a man he never met, a working man in Wales, fighting cancer in silence, with a speech as his only comfort. Behind them, the class of children stood frozen. One whispered, "Why does the president look sad?" The teacher, wiping her eyes, whispered back, "Because sometimes you learn that your words became someone's last hope. That changes you." Obama turned back to Dylan. Your father was a good man. Dylan nodded. He believed words could heal, that dignity was something you choose, not something you're given. Obama whispered. He was right. Rain fell gently around them, but nothing else moved, because in that courtyard, Something powerful had happened. 2 lives had crossed, not through politics, but through a dying man's final wish. The silence was thick now. Not the silence of duty, but something heavier, like the world itself had paused to listen. Barack Obama, standing face to face with the Royal Guard, didn't speak for a long moment. He had just heard something. That shook him deeply. The young guard, Lance Corporal Dylan Price, stood still again. His training told him not to move. But something inside him had already changed. He had broken the silence, and now, a story long buried in his father's heart was finally being told. "My sister found a letter this morning," Dylan said quietly. Obama looked up, his eyes focused again. "A letter?" he asked. "Yes, sir." Dylan nodded. "My father wrote it to you. 3 pages. Never sent it. Just folded it and tucked it inside his old tape player. The one he used to play your speech every night." Obama took a small step closer. "You remember what it said?" Dylan's voice was steady, though his hands trembled slightly. "He wrote about your words, about how they gave him hope when he had nothing else. How during those nights when the cancer was taking everything, your voice reminded him that dignity wasn't lost in the world." The former president's eyes filled again. Not with the tears of a public figure, but with something quieter and deeper. The grief of a man who had just heard he had unknowingly sat beside a dying man every night. "Through a cassette tape, he wrote about me too," Dylan added. "Said he was proud, said he hoped one day you'd meet me, see what your words helped build." Obama covered his mouth briefly, trying to stop the wave of emotion rising inside him. He had given hundreds of speeches in his life, 2 world leaders, 2 crowds of thousands, but he never imagined one would be played beside a man's hospital bed, night after night. Behind them, the school children stood in complete stillness. Even the youngest could feel it. This was not just a moment between a president and a soldier. This was something bigger. Dylan continued. "That letter. The last line broke me, sir." Obama raised his eyes, waiting. He wrote, "If you do meet my Dylan, tell him his old man was right about dignity. Tell him it's not what others give you. It's what you refuse to let them take away." Those words hit Obama like a wave. His knees didn't buckle, but his heart did. His breath caught in his throat, and he pressed a hand to his chest. He looked at Dylan as if seeing not just the man, but the father behind him. The man who never asked for anything, who lived quietly, who believed in something bigger. "Your father was right," Obama said in a shaky voice. He understood something that many never will. Dylan lowered his voice. He didn't think he mattered to the world. "But your words, they made him feel like he did." Obama slowly reached into his coat again and pulled out a handkerchief. Wiping his eyes, he didn't care about cameras or news. This wasn't for the world. This was for Tom Price, a man he never met, but somehow now felt like he had known forever. "Dylan," he said gently, "would you do something for me?" "Yes." "Sir, would you and your sister be willing to send me that letter? I want to read every word." Dylan nodded. "She'd be honored, sir." "And one more thing," Obama added, his voice filled with quiet strength. "That speech, I need to find every version, every draft. I want to remember why I wrote it. I want to understand what it meant to someone who carried it into his final hours." Then he paused, looking Dylan straight in the eyes. "You're not just a guard," he said. "Your father's legacy. It's every time you stand here, you carry his belief in dignity." Dylan's face didn't change, but his eyes did. They glistened with pride. "Double quotes, yes, sir," he said. "I will carry it every day." Obama stepped back. He looked around the courtyard again, where tourists and children still stood, silent and respectful. The air was different now. The rain hadn't stopped, but it no longer felt cold, because something beautiful had just happened. A conversation that was never supposed to happen. Between a president and a guard had brought a lost voice back to life. A father's quiet. Belief had reached across time and silence and rain, and found its way home. The moment had passed, but its weight still hung in the air. Barack Obama stood still, eyes red, coat soaked with London rain. He looked at the young guard once more, not as a figure in uniform, but as a son, as a symbol, as a quiet answer. to a question he didn't know he'd been asking for years. Did my words matter? Now he knew. He took a breath, steadied himself, then softly said, "Dylan, may I call you that?" "Yes, sir." Obama gave a small nod. "Hope you never forget what you just did. Not for me, but for your father. You honored him with your silence, even more with your words." Dylan didn't smile. Guards don't smile. But something in his eyes changed. Something grateful. Something proud. "Thank you, sir," he said. Then he stepped back. Into position, heels together, hands returned behind his back, posture tall, the royal guard once again. But something was different now. He was still a statue on the outside. But inside, he was a son who had delivered his father's final message. Obama turned slowly toward the wreath, which lay ready at the foot of the memorial. He walked toward it, his steps no longer heavy. He stood before it for a moment, not as a politician, but as a man, and with both hands, he gently laid the wreath down. Rain slid down his face. He closed his eyes, not in ceremony, but in silence. A silence filled with memories of speeches written late at night, of words meant for the world, of a father in Wales who had believed in those words. When he opened his eyes, he whispered, "Rest well, Mr. Price." He turned back toward the path. The security team stepped forward. Agent Mitchell kept her voice low. "Sir," she said gently, "the car is ready." Obama nodded. "Just one more thing," he said. "I need to write some letters today." Mitchell paused. "Letters, sir?" He nodded again. "To family in Cardiff, to a young man's commanding officer, and to my speech team. I want them to know we got it right. At least once." She gave a small smile and stepped back. As Obama walked toward the gates, the tourists began to move again. Phones clicked. Voices returned. But everything felt softer now, like the whole courtyard understood something sacred had just happened. A little boy tugged at his teacher's coat. "Miss Jenkins, will the president remember this?" She smiled, wiping a tear from her cheek. "I think he'll remember it for the rest of his life." Across the street, an older man placed his hat over his heart. His granddaughter watched him closely. "Why are you crying, Grandpa?" she asked. "Because sometimes," he said, "a man says something once, doesn't know that someone else has been listening to it for the rest of their life." Back at the embassy, Obama sat quietly in the car, staring out the rain-covered window. He pulled out his phone and found a number. His old speechwriter. "John," he said when the call connected. "Remember the Cairo speech?" "Of course," came the voice on the other side. "I just met someone who listened to it. Every single night for 11 years, a man dying of cancer, a father, a truck driver, a believer in dignity." He paused, eyes still wet. "We gave him peace," he said. "That speech was more than just words. It was company. It was comfort." "Wow," John whispered. "Do you want the old drafts?" "I want everything," Obama said. "Every cut sentence, every line we argued over. I want to remember why we wrote it." Ended the call and sat still for a while. Then he took out a pen. The first letter he wrote was to Megan Price. He told her about the moment at the memorial, about the coin, about her brother. He thanked her for sharing the letter, and asked her if she would allow it to be placed in his presidential library. Not behind glass, but in a space where people could read it and remember that words, even quiet ones, matter. Later, his foundation set up a scholarship, not big, not loud, but honest, for children of Welsh service members. It was called the Thomas Arthur Price Memorial Fund. It helped kids who knew what dignity meant because they had lived beside it. 6 months later, Dylan Price was promoted to corporal. His commander mentioned a special letter from Washington. Dylan didn't speak about it. Guards don't talk. But he carried the bronze coin in his chest pocket every day. And when the wind blew just right and the rain touched his face, he could still hear two voices in his mind, his father's and President Obama's. One had taught him how to stand. The other had reminded him why. And in between them, a silence had been broken, the kind that changes everything.